In this lecture, we're going to load the correct scene from the main menu. Currently, the game cannot detect saved files from the player. They'll be forced to start from the beginning every time they restart the game. That's not what we want. The game should present the player with the option of starting a new game or continuing from a previous save. The first step in our journey to adding this feature is to dynamically render the menu. In our menu, a single button gets rendered. A second button should be rendered if the player has saved data. If they don't, the Start button should be the only button in the menu. In Visual Studio Code, open the UI main menu state. The first step is to store the index of the scene. If the player chooses to continue from their saved file, we should load the scene saved on the player's file system. At the top of the class, add an integer variable called sceneIndex. Next, let's update this variable from the enterState method. We're going to check the player's data at the top of the method. Add a conditional statement with the following condition: player prefs dot has key scene index. If this condition evaluates to true, the player has saved data. We can proceed to update the variable. Set the scene index variable to the player prefs dot getInt scene index method. After storing the index, we can start dynamically adding a button to the main menu. Let's outsource this logic to a separate method. After updating the variable, add a method called addButton. Next, at the bottom of the class, define this method. We're already familiar with the process of creating an element with Unity. We must create an instance of the class associated with the element. In the method, create a variable called continueButton with the button class as the type. Set the variable to a new instance of the button class. We have the option of adding this button to the document. Before doing so, we should modify the button's styles to match our document. We outsource the styles to a class. Let's run the continueButton.addClassToList method. The name of our class is called MenuButton. Next, we should update the inner text of the button. Set the continueButton.text property to the following: continue. Great! Our button is ready to be added. We're going to add it to the button's element, which was the container for our buttons. First, we must select this element. Let's perform a query. Create a variable called main_menu_buttons with the visualElement class as the type. Set it to the controller.main_menu_container.queueVisualElement method. As usual, we're using the queue method to select a single element. This query is being performed on the main menu container element. We should always perform our queries on the correct elements. The last thing we want is to accidentally select the wrong element. Let's pass in the name of the element, which was called buttons. After selecting the element, the last step is to add it to the document. Below the variable, call the main_menu.add method with the continueButton variable. That should do it. Let's head over to Unity. Before playing the game, I'm going to clear the player preferences. We're going to test the menu for one button. Initially, only the Start button should appear on the main menu scene. You should be on the main menu scene. Otherwise, move over to it. Once you've got that sorted, let's play the game to find out. So far, so good. Let's start the game. Inside the game, I'm going to run to the portal. Next, I'll stop the game. This time, the Continue button should appear in the menu. I'll start the game again. As you can see, the script was able to detect a saved file on the player's file system. We can navigate the menu to select either option. At the moment, choosing the Continue button does nothing. In the next lecture, let's begin loading the player into the correct scene.